Hello everyone and welcome back to KitbashCarnage. So today we're going to have a look at a quick and easy base I'm going to make for one of my Warhammer miniatures that's in my army, the Mutant Bearers of Faith. So I'm going to use these paints, the Flora range from Green Stuff World, just to get the effect I'm looking for. These can be used in contrast with other normal paints, be it from other ranges, just to make the colours pop that little bit more. So we're going to use cork on this base, our favourite thing to use for making bases. And we're going to use some, we're going to use some epoxy resin. So this is something I've used once or twice before, and I haven't really done as good as a job as I think everybody would think I would do, but it's only the first or second time I've used it, so we'll see what happens and give it a go. So if you've seen the previous videos, link in the description, this is the basic way I like to start off my bases. So sometimes I will quickly do an outline of the size of the base, or I'll just do it by eye. Sometimes I use a snips, as you've seen I was going through there, and then sometimes I just use my hands. As long as I can take off a rough bit of cork that I want to use, that's all I'm looking for here. And then we use our snips then just to cut around the edges in order to not have as much overhang, as we don't want too much overhang with what we're doing with this particular base. So we'll just use our finger, hold it in place, be careful everyone, like I always say, safety first. So we'll just cut around this nice and quick and make sure that we have the base facing us and not the cork. That way the overhang is cut off and it's not the other way around, which would leave a little lip. So as you've seen, we keep all that scraps to the side because we use all that, and here we're just going to draw a quick outline of what we want to take off the base, just so we have it in our head, a visual in our head of what we want. So as you see here, we're just using the snips just to cut out that little bit that we don't want and get the ideal shape that we want in the base. So for the idea we're going for, this base doesn't have to, I say this base, a lot of the stuff I do, we're not really perfectionists here on this channel. Use your finger just to scrape little bits off, just getting a rough work area here to build upon, and as you'll see later on in the video, we're only doing rough bits here, not rough bits, rough bits here and there. You tend to be able to, it will surprise you, you can come out with better luck sometimes with hiding your crimes and making other bits look better than they're supposed to be by painting and other effects, shall I say. So no panic everyone, you are your worst critic at the end of the day, so don't panic, just take your time if you want this to look absolutely perfect. But if you're like me and you just want to get this done without drying time, this whole thing took me about an hour or less to do. So take the drying time out of that and you can get plenty of these done in a day. Sometimes I will be working on multiples of these and working on one while another is drying. It's a good way to spread your time throughout the day and work on separate projects in the one time, because at the end of the day, we all know there's only 24 hours in a day, which I've always said I'd love there to be 32 because that would be perfect. But yeah, enough rambling. Let's see what else we have here. So as you see, we're just smoothing off the edges there with the excess PVA glue. It doesn't have to look that fantastic because, like I said, we will hide our crimes here, and we're about to use the epoxy also near the end, and that will hide a lot of the crimes, as you'll see. So here I'm just measuring out a piece of sprue just to see which would fit best over this crack. My idea in my head is basically a flowing lava pit or crack of lava. So I'm trying to think of what will cover up this crack. Was there something there previous? A bit of texture or variation, you know what I mean? Variety in the piece, just to break it up a bit so it's not just a flat plain surface with some lava flowing through it. So here I'm just chipping off the edges of the sprue just to give myself more of a flat surface so I can stick better on the cork. You could just push it down hard on the cork and it should just push into it and make its own flat level surface, but for ease sake and for the sake of me rushing, not letting time for the PVA to dry, and I don't want to push the cork off the base, especially on camera, and then have to restart everything all over again. So I just snip it off here and we'll just use some more PVA to stick that down. So we're just going to push down nice and firmly here just to make sure that there's a nice bond between the cork and the sprue. And you might wonder why I'm using PVA in this instance and not super glue. It's more because the super glue soaks into the cork more than PVA does. So I'm using the PVA. Not that PVA doesn't soak into the cork, but it soaks in less and I can use more of it because it's more cheaply and widely available. So as you can see, I'm just using the excess bits there that I cut off and I'm just sprinkling it over just to stick onto them bits of PVA that are left exposed and to create a little bit more texture. Not to say that these won't fall off at any stage, but any bits that stay on, it's a bit more texture than we had in the first place. So may as well, why not? It's not doing any harm. So this is what we have so far. So we have got our cork stuck to our base. We have a bit of sprue there, and that's it so far. So I'll get this primed and be right back. So this is it all primed up. So we've just stuck a base coat of prime on, red prime, and we're ready just to get painting. So we'll start off here with some nice bit of silver just to paint the sprue that we've done. Now don't worry too much about how we paint or how I paint specifically. I don't care how you paint it whatever way you want to paint, but the way you see me painting, don't worry too much. We tend to hide our crimes near the end, and you see now and again I do things in certain ways in order to like layer the crimes, if that makes sense. Like I do something and then I'll do something else, but then after that I'll do something else that might hide what I've just done because something didn't look good. If any of this makes sense to you, I hope it does, because it's starting to not make sense to me. So we'll just do this sprue here. I'd also like to take this time to mention I started a Ko-Fi channel. So Ko-Fi is basically the same as Patreon, apart from majority of the proceeds go directly to the creator instead of directly in the pockets of business owners. Not to say that the business doesn't take some percentage of the funds or any proceeds or support that the creators get through Ko-Fi. Obviously businesses need to take a percentage in order to run the business, but majority of the funds are given directly to the creator themselves, and all funds or proceeds or support go directly to helping myself support the channel and any projects or future projects that may come. So here we're sticking on a black paint and we're just stabbing it around, not taking too much care of how we place it. Like I said, we're not really too Mr. Perfect on this show. I'm a show now on this channel, but we'll hide our crimes later down the line. So we're just dabbing it on here, getting the black on in order so we have something to work with, some type of base to work with, and a foundation in order to work from. So the same concept goes for the paint as did the PVA glue, or the glue in general. Because cork is more porous or absorbent, shall I say, I think that's the word, than a lot of other materials, you're better off putting a lot more of the paint on than you would expect to have to put on, because it will just soak in and you won't have that deep rich black colour, or deep dark black colour. Is rich the right word? You know what I mean. So after letting that black set for a while and dry, we're now moving on to the red. So I used the Green Stuff World red Flora colour here, Flora red, just to give the red that's on already a bit more of a bit more of a brighter tone to it. And that should give us that colour we're looking for of the lava look. So same concept goes with the black that we just done. Dab this on pretty heavily. I really can't talk today during this video. Dab it on pretty heavily in order to get that good shine coming from it. And as you can see, I just swapped out the brush there. It wasn't really a decent enough tip for me to be using, so I just swapped it out for a cleaner, thicker brush head, so we can just dab this on faster and get it done as quick as possible. So I'd just like to take this time. I really need to learn how to talk again. I'd just like to take this time just to say thank you to everybody who's stayed on this journey with me in this channel and on this video so far, and didn't click off as soon as I start stumbling from the first time. So thanks everyone, and hopefully you get something from these videos. Leave it in the comments, any ideas you have for me to do. We have a lot of projects lined up, but I'd love to do some projects or anything for the community itself. So any ideas you have, just put up down on the comments. Put down. Put any projects you have or any ideas in the comments below, everyone, and let me know your thoughts on future ideas we can do. I have a huge project lined up that I will tell you soon. Once I find out the logistics of it, you'll soon find out. But yeah, leave your comments down below on ideas for the future. So as you can start to see here, the red has started to make that red underneath pop a bit. So it enhances the colors that it is put on top of. So alone it does do the same technique, but it doesn't work as well alone. It really works quite well being added on top of an additional color that is somewhat the same color tone as what the floral color you're adding on top. So you can see it's just starting to enhance that red color, make it look like we have that fiery lava that we're looking at. And then the previous colors to the next future colors to be added on will also add to that enhancement of that lava look. So I'm just making sure that I have a decent thickness, a decent layer of the paint on, because I know that in time it will soak up into the cork. So I don't want to have to come back and add more on after the fact. I'd rather just add enough on now, and then it will all dry up. So we'll have to leave this now to dry out before we start adding on the orange, floral orange, which then adds another layer to that lava color before we add on the yellow flora, which adds that third layer of the lava color. So I'll bring you back as soon as this is dried. So the flora red has dried up now, and this is what we're looking at so far. So I hope you can see with the camera. We've got this so far. We've got our black down, our cork, our piece of sprue, and our red black paint and the flora red, and now we're moving on to the flora orange and the flora yellow. So I'm just trying to grab a clean paintbrush here, hold on, and we're just throwing a paintbrush halfway across the desk. Very good. Make sure you give all your paints a quick shake before usage, and we'll just squirt a little bit on here. I say a little bit, but I'll rephrase again. Use kind of more than you would expect, because of the cork will absorb more of the paint than you would expect. Not as much now because there's that extra layer of paint on, which will block a lot of the pores, or I don't know how to explain it. It would block a lot of the way the paint would escape through the cork, but still add more of the paint on than you would think you would normally use. So here we're just being careful just to try not to paint to sprue or the sides, too much of the sides. Like I said previously at the start of the video, we'll hide all our crimes, so don't worry too much if you do knock anything. We'll paint over it and hide our crimes. But what we're trying to do here is make sure that we paint in the middle of the flora red we just put down, like an orange channel, if that makes any sense, in between the colors we just put down. So you still have the base red that was there, then you have the flora red that is a little bit that's on, but it's not painted all the way up to the top edge of the black there, so it's in the channel but not painted up to the edge. Then you have the yellow or the orange flora that is then painted up to the Flora red, but then it's not painted all the way up to the top of the Flora red base, if that makes sense. So you're leaving the normal base coat of red that was down, then you're leaving a little sliver of the Flora red that was down, then you're leaving the orange that was down, and we'll put then in a little bit we'll put down the yellow Flora, but we'll leave a little bit of the orange base that's down, if that makes sense. So you have this kind of look of fire kind of flowing and the moving flames. So you have a look in a while, we'll see the outcome. But this is what we're trying to make sure, that we don't paint over up all the way up to the top of the black, that we're leaving these layers of lines. So now we'll leave that there and we'll let that dry before moving on to the yellow. So once that's dry, we'll move on to the yellow. So we're back, and yeah, this is what the yellow looks like. I can't move on to the yellow. Well, I can. We have moved on to yellow, but I made a mistake and I don't have the footage for the yellow. But this is what it looks like after you do that same technique we done previous with the orange. This is what it looks like after you put the yellow down. So as you can see, we're now going to move on to painting some black stripes or black dots, and then move it into little stripes on the yellow that has dried, in order to create like a look of movement or rocks, debris shall we say, in the river of lava. So we're just putting a few tiny little dots on, and then we'll move that round in order to create that look that we're looking for. So we're just going to grab a new brush here, and we're going to use this brush head to move the paint that we just put down in certain directions to make it look like the lava is flowing like a river, and ever so slightly creating these small little lines, flowing directional lines, and then once we stick the resin on top in this crack that we've created, it should hopefully create that flowy look that we're trying to make here. Hopefully, fingers crossed. This could all turn out totally wrong. But we'll have a look at how it turns out. So as you can see, the effect we kind of got here, it just gives it a little bit of breaks it up, gives it a bit of variety, and we just use that, kind of push it down to each individual bristle, then tends to make a stroke instead of the whole thing as one. So I couldn't find, I didn't have, and I wasn't going to buy some type of way to encase this base. I could have probably found a plastic cup or something, but I found electrical tape. So for the first time ever that I've seen and that I've done, we're going to try use electrical tape as the border, shall I say, for the resin. So like a little protection, so the resin doesn't pour out. But before that, I just realized that a little bit of dry brushing to break up the rocks is needed. So thankfully I remembered before we stuck the resin on, because there's no way I'm going to chip off resin or be able to paint like through the resin with my paintbrush. So we'll give this a quick dry brush, that should bring it to life a little bit more, before we make this boundary kind of barrier with the electrical tape before we put the resin in. So as you see, that dry brush in there just gives it a little bit more of a stone texture. So it breaks up the black and gives it more of that that stone texture we are looking for. So like I said, this is the first time I've done this with this electrical tape, so fingers crossed it works out. But the basic principle in my head, the idea of it makes sense. So we'll break this apart here, and now we can't use it because it's stuck to all the cork, so that's brilliant. So we won't break it off, and we'll just pull another bit out here. And I'm thinking if we stick it back, the idea was if we stick it on itself, that then has created a plastic string, shall we say, and that plastic string is stretchable to a certain degree, malleable, you know, like it's waterproof, all these things. And that's what I was like, well, so is probably a protective thing that I would buy to do this in. But if I use this and stick it so it's just above where I want the resin to be, and then just wrap it around like I'm doing here, like you see doing here. Now while I was doing this, I was just thinking in my head, I'm gonna have to just try wrap this as tight as I can to make it somewhat waterproof, resin proof, so it doesn't start leaking off the bottom of it out the sides, and I'm left with resin all over my hobby area and all over the mat and everywhere. And then yeah, so in order for that not to happen, I said a quick prayer first. No, but I wrapped it as tight as I could around the edge to try create a seal, so it felt like it was quite a tight seal. And then, as you see, we ran down to the actual tape, and with that tape I went over it again, just to go back over the non-sticky part that I just put down to seal it around the actual base. So as you can see, it's just going around there, and then I used my scissors to cut that bit off, because I didn't want to I could have broken it by pulling it, but I didn't want to pull it and destroy the actual base that we just done. So thankfully I used the scissors. And now we're just pulling the edges in order to not have it as wrinkly. Kind of, while I was tightening it up, it was getting taut. It kind of creased inwards and made all these wrinkly bits, which I don't mind because that creates like a flow of the lava, or I hope it does anyway. But I didn't want it to be not round. I didn't want the base to be round and then it to be just all this crinkly at top. I'd rather to be a little bit more rounded than what I was looking at the beginning. So I'm just stretching the electrical tape round and round, just on every side I can, and that then pulls it loose enough to expand it a little bit more that I was happy with. So as you can see, it just expanded it around from the edges. Still a bit crinkly, but definitely not as crinkly as it was at the beginning. So fingers crossed, let's move on to the epoxy resin. Right, so the epoxy resin that I got was a 1-to-1 ratio. Just got it over the internet. Yeah, anyone who is new to epoxy, I'd recommend a 1-to-1 ratio. It just makes life so much easier. You literally add the same amount as this, set into the same amount as this. I'm using 2 bottle lids here. And I'm going to add by eye. I know I could be more precise, but I'm going to add by eye the same of solution A and solution B into 2 lids, and then mix them into a separate container. And then from that mixture, we should then pour that into the base kind of thing that we're doing here. So fingers crossed this all works out and we don't make too much of a mess. I'm so glad that I didn't pour any of this all over the work table. Like, during this whole time I was doing this, I was fully expecting one of the bottles to just go floofed all over the table. Don't ask me what floofed was, but apparently that's the noise that epoxy resin makes when it pours all over your hobby table. So, but yeah, thankfully none of that happened. And let's have a look at what we do here now. So I end up finding a broken plastic lid from, I think it was just a Citadel spray primer or something, and I'm pouring both of them into both of the equal A and B parts of the solution into that lid, and I'm going to use that then as a container, my mixing container. There's no point, I don't see any point in having like all these specific containers. Just use what you have lying around. Like, yes, I have specific containers for them, but I also had these lids lying around, and if using these 3 lids saves me 3 specific containers for another hobby project, then that would be great for me. So at the beginning, I forgot what I was doing here and started to mix very, very rapidly, as you've seen, and then realized, oh, I am doing epoxy resin. You can't whip it like cream. You have to stir ever so gently and fold it into one another. So that's the first mistake that happened with me when I made my first epoxy cast, which was a little head just in as a dice. I was trying to make a dice. I whipped it instead of folding it, and that created all these bubbles that then the outcome was, well, let's just say, wasn't the best. So just make sure you're folding your resin and don't whip it in order to create as least amount of bubbles as possible. And you'll see I also use this pipette, whatever it's called, in order to, that I got with the kit, thankfully enough. I also got gloves, so I use PPE and stuff when doing all this. But I use this pipette thing to take up some of the resin and squeeze it in the edges of the mold, the base thing that I have here, just so the resin actually gets into the corners, because I didn't want to have any big air gaps or any big gaps in general where none of the resin got, epoxy resin that is. So we're just being ever so careful here doing that, and then we're going to continue to pour it into the lava stream. So I don't know why these are the ones that I got with the kit. Maybe the kit or the bit I had, the solution I made just here was a bit thicker than it should have been. I was a bit off my ratios, but definitely was quite thick trying to get it up through this pipette here. So as you can see, we're just continuing going around the edges, and then we'll use what's left and fill in the middle. I really need to learn how to speak again. Everyone, thumbs up in the chat for me, KitbashCarnage, learning how to speak all over again. At least we have a laugh in these videos. Oh. So now that that's done, we'll let that to dry for 24 hours and we'll see how it is in the morning, and I'll take some pictures and add it to the end. And there's a little surprise in it here at the end that I didn't tell you about the floor paints. But thanks everyone for staying tuned, and like, subscribe and comment. And KitbashCarnage out.